I made a video earlier today about the hypocrisy of advice columnists, agony ants as they're sometimes known, and the two-faced hypocritical way that they treat men and women. Men are treated like adults, women are treated like children. And I based what's going to become the latter part of this video on the way that they treat men and women who have affairs behind their partner's back. And you'll see that if you when you get to it. But it then struck me decades ago when I used to live in houses in rooms. I'd read my landlady's magazines, women's magazines, and I'd read newspapers as well, and I'd look at what these advice columnists had to say, and they were forever trying to persuade women, give women complaining about their marriages. They were desperately trying to persuade them, get divorced. The women writing into them were looking for the green light. They were always saying that, I'm stuck in a loveless marriage, I've tried everything I could think of, and blah, blah, blah. And the advice was always the same. Well, sometimes you have to put yourself first. You have to think of yourself. Maybe it's time for you to move along. Maybe he's not the right man for you anymore, and so on and so forth. And bear in mind, and these letters could even be written by these people themselves. They're charlatans anyway in many cases, but it was a concerted attempt, it seemed to me, to destabilize and break down other people's relationships, as the media do as a whole, through feminism, of course. And when you bear in mind how many millions of women all over the world look at this advice and take it on board, because this advice isn't just aimed at the woman whose letter is published. It's aimed at all other women, and I believe that advice columnists are amongst the most dangerous feminists working in the media. Anyway, I'm going to stop this first part of the video, attach what I did earlier to this, and then you can make up your own mind. I'm sure that there have been many good advice columnists, agony ants as they're called sometimes, over the years. Good, decent, well-meaning women, because the overwhelming majority of them are, of course, women. But there are also plenty of charlatans amongst them. Remember, you have women's magazines, you have newspapers, and these publications, when they have these, they employ people in that capacity. They're not necessarily looking for someone who actually genuinely cares. They're looking all the time for a professional writer. They're looking for someone who's a manipulator, who can skillfully use words. And also remember this: if you have an advice columnist and they have their name at the top of their page, and they have a page full of stuff, that is not their page. That page belongs to the editors. It's the editorial people's page, and they can censor and reword and rewrite and dismiss things as they please, and you have to fit in with the narrative that they want to be pumped out. And the golden rule of being an agony ant, it's you always tell women what they want to hear. You never blame women, and a lot of them they're as bad as these crystal ball crazies, these people who try and tell you your future through a crystal ball. Actually, the horoscope, newspapers have horoscope columns. A lot of them are they're con artists, and I always found back in the days when I used to read this crap, I'm going back over 10 years now, it was almost for amusement, but you immediately notice the different way that they treat men and women, particularly when it comes to them having affairs. With the men, they don't exactly tell him he's a rat and a pig and a dirty cheat, but he's given a very stern rebuke indeed, and told to think about his wife and children. And with a woman, there's always a pile of excuses, and if the female writing in herself doesn't declare that she's either confused, or she felt confused as she cheated on her husband of 20 years and had sex with the boy, 17-year-old boy living next door, and she feels guilty. And of course, the agony ant will always say, no, you mustn't feel guilty. You were stuck in a loveless marriage. There must have been something wrong. Yeah, that's right. It's always the man's fault. Yeah, she was confused and she was vulnerable. She was vulnerable as well. And just let me give you some synonyms for the word vulnerable. And by the way, this, of course, is infantilizing women, as usual, reducing them from being supposedly responsible adults to having no capacity for self-regulatory thought. They're being treated as if they're special needs children. It's disgusting what these women do. Anyway, synonyms for vulnerable: defenseless, exposed, now naked and exposed, ready, ready for sex, susceptible, unsafe. I would say to women there, if you have sex with a man outside of wedlock, then you better make sure that he wears a condom, because if you catch a disease and you pass it on to your husband, of course, then he's going to be the one writing to the agony aunt saying that you're a gigantic slut. He's married to a slut, and he'd be rebuked for that because he'd be told that it was his fault because he wasn't taking care of your needs. Anyway, weak, naked, that's right, out on a limb, sitting duck, sucker, okay, just covered that, unguarded, unprotected, thin skin, wide open legs. Anyway, that's enough of vulnerable. And let's not forget all the other excuses that women are dispensed to women by these advice columnists. They probably had premenstrual tension or postnatal depression, or they're menopausal, or it's hormonal. As usual, the woman's hormones are poor woman. If they're talking about male and testosterone, dirty, nasty, evil testosterone. Then there's, I can remember, Munchausen syndrome, I think it was called, came out. Munchausen syndrome disorder by proxy, whatever the hell it was. Bipolar, that's a common one these days. She beat her husband because she must have been suffering from slow burn, fast burn, this burn, that burn, and premenstrual tension. I've got no time for that at all. For me, I would call it prehistoric monkey tantrums. Anyway, on to synonyms for confused: baffled, befuddled, bemused, confounded, dazed, disorientated, flustered, misled, muddled, mystified, perplexed, perturbed, puzzled, troubled, unsettled, upset, worried, and blah blah bloody blah. It just goes on and on and on, and I'm absolutely sick and tired of this. And the woman knows exactly what she's doing, because these extramarital affairs, as I've said before, they all have one thing in common: sex. So what I'm supposed to believe that when she arranged some clandestine meeting with this guy she wanted to have sex with in some seedy motel, they booked a room. She was confused. She was confused when she opened the door to the room. She was confused. She knows exactly what she's bloody doing, just like a man. She tore all her clothes off her, and she was so confused about it. When she sucked his dick, she'd never been so befuddled in her life. And when she pounded him on the bed and scratched his back and screamed for more and more and more, she was so fucked up and vulnerable and messed up. And then they had seconds, and then after that she smoked the most confused post-coital cigarette she's ever smoked in her life. This is such bullshit. And then they make another date, and she continues cheating, and she does it for sex. She isn't befuddled. She isn't fucked up. She's just a modern woman. And I'd say to guys, the problem with if a guy cheats on his wife, but he has sex with her, then at least the woman always knows when she gives birth that it's her child. She's passed the genes along. These days, women have become so promiscuous, egged on and persuaded by women's magazines in particular, that men don't know whether the child that their wife gives birth to is their own necessarily. And in France, I think it's even illegal for a man, without the permission of the woman, to have a paternity test. Anyway, I'm going to do a video, they've been done before of course, covering men who have children, their wives have children that aren't their own, and yet they're forced to pay child maintenance for them, and if they don't, they go to jail. And I think I'll include in that the boys who were raped, underage boys who were raped, particularly in the United States, by babysitters. It could be a teacher, but babysitters are very common. And then when the babysitter ends up having a child, the boy, the rape victim, is actually obliged to pay child maintenance. And if he doesn't pay it, he goes to jail as well. Anyway, if you've got this far, thank you very much indeed. Thumbs up always helps, and please consider subbing if you like. Thank you.